With Mary. Is here. Hi, Mary. Can you hear us?
Yep. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
So, Mary, when you want to speak, maybe you can put your hand up because it's hard to see the little hand from here. Okay, thanks.
There we go. Yeah, we can see the big hand. Big
Yeah.
hand.
Okay. Welcome to the Township of Selwyn regular council meeting of Tuesday, June the 6th, 2023. We respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississauga and Anishinaabe. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations. May we honor those teachings. Today is the 79th anniversary of D-Day. During our moment of silence that we will hold, can we please honor, respect, remember, and thank those who fought, died, and sacrificed for our freedom, lest we forget. We'll have a moment of silence now. Thank you. Members of the public, staff, presenters, and members of council, please be advised that meetings are broadcast and recorded and made available on the internet. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? Seeing none, please note that in the minutes. We have our minutes of May the 23rd, 2023 and May the 24th, 2023. May I have a mover? Councillor Henry, Councillor Boyko, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Is there any discussion out of the minutes? Seeing none, we will go to our first deputation from Baker Tilly, KDN LLP, all these initials of our 2022 financial statement. And we have a presentation from Mr. Richard Stiganga. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Yes. So first off, I will run through the summary presentation for the year-end results for 2022. These all come out of the draft audited financial statements that I believe are also part of the package. But for most people, or including accountants, they find this format a little easier to follow. So as we go through, I'll try to highlight some. Make some highlights and highlight the difference too between how you your tax rate budget compared to the PSAB presentation. So, but first, sorry, when we come to the first slide within the package, the auditor's report is presented there. The auditor's report is a 2-page report, and that is our report on the financial statements. And what we've taken here is the what we consider to be the important paragraph that in our opinion, the accompanying consolidated financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the Township of Selwyn at December 31st and the results of its operations and its cash flows for the year then ended in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting policies, or more commonly known as PSAB. So that is your standard clean unqualified auditors reports. And keep in mind when it says consolidated, it includes both the operations of the township and the library board. So, just a quick summary of some of the things we as auditors do when we conduct our audit and how we gather our audit evidence to produce our audit opinion. And of course, it involves some of the processes listed here. A lot of our work does involve looking at testing, agreeing things to supporting documentation and gathering our evidence that way. And we look at that in a number of different venues of how the money comes in, being your revenues, how it goes out, being your disbursements and your payroll, and then how you adjust things through your journal entries. And we now utilize a lot of data analysis to look at those items. So we run through your general ledger data through an analytics program that then kind of directs us and guides us what to test, how to test, and things that do require additional review as we go through and complete the audit. Overall, the audit is complete pending council approval of the financial statements, receipt of signed representation letter, which I believe I've received just as I came in here, as well as the receipt of the legal letter that was sent out. Overall, there were no significant difficulties encountered during the course of our audit, no changes to our audit plan or disagreements or difficulties with management, and excellent cooperation from your staff. We did not have any unadjusted differences at the end of the year that weren't corrected by your staff. Just one thing to highlight, when you look at the detailed financial statements, there is a prior period adjustment to pick up some tangible capital assets that weren't picked up in the past, and they all relate to stormwater management facilities or water retention ponds. So they have been picked up and included in both your tangible capital assets and your equity in your capital assets, but operationally, it does not change your reserves or any type of operational surplus. So now when we take a look at some of the numbers overall under PSAB, it does break the assets down into two types of assets. Financial assets are those that are either cash or ideally will be turned into cash. And the other ones a little later on are non-financial assets, and those are items that you utilize to provide services to your ratepayers. Overall, between cash and investments this year, there was just about a $300,000 decrease between those two lines. This year, you did have the opportunity to invest in a good investment vehicle that you took advantage of, so to derive some higher interest this year. So that's why there's a flip between those two lines there. And as rates have increased over the last year, yes, you can find different avenues to make greater advantage of that. And of course, as with any organization, some people owe you money in the form of accounts receivable, being various grants, HST, as well as user groups and users of your facilities owe you money as well. And as well, too, within the water and sewer category as a larger component of your receivables there, too. Your taxes receivable, they are broken out separately from regular receivables, of course. So these are the charges you have on properties where people owe you the money. So therefore, keep in mind, when you pay the county and school boards, you pay them regardless of whether the ratepayers paid you. So in essence, you're the banker in this instance. Overall, you can see there that taxes receivable were up year over year. But still, as a percentage of your total levy, you're sitting at about 6.4%, up from about 5.7%, including principal and interest, which is still well below the Ministry of Municipal Affairs guideline of low risk of being 10% or less. So you still sit in a good position there. So that's always good to see. Yeah. So then in total, your total financial assets just increased slightly year over year. And then, of course, we have a bar graph showing that over time, and you can see between 20 and 21, just the flip between the gray and the green bar between cash and investments. Next, we come to the financial liabilities. So these are the amounts you owe to others, and these ones will eventually take cash, but there's no correlation to what you might see in a commercial statement between current and long-term. PSAB just recognizes them all as liabilities. So overall, you can see your accounts payable and accrued liabilities. up slightly year over year. And you can see there the trend, the 5-year trend there, they are increasing. A lot of that does relate to holdbacks on construction projects and where they sit in the balance of those projects, and as well too some of the larger projects. The holdback can be outstanding for a longer time period than most. So that explains some of that increase. And if you're wondering, like within there, of course, you have about 600,000 in planning and security deposits in that number as well. Trade payables, amounts set aside for payroll and accruals, and amounts owing to both the county and the school boards as well. So all of those items are within that total. Next, we come to deferred revenue obligatory reserve fund. So this is definitely a PSAB anomaly. This then represents the cash that you have received for both development charges, Canada Community Building Fund or gas tax, and parkland. So these are monies that you've received, but they are in essence parked here until you spend them within the requirements. So when you make an eligible expenditure under that, then you can take the money out of here and then show it as revenue. But for this year, it remains. But at the end of the year, if it's unspent, it remains here. And the biggest change there is you used a lot of your gas tax and Canada Community Building Fund in 2022 that you had set aside from the year before for projects. Yeah. Your deferred revenue other just represents some majority OCIF funding that you have that you can utilize moving forward. Your long-term debt, you have one debt instrument outstanding for your FIT project, and that went down by about $103,000. Then the next two items are PSAB related as well. So these represent items that you have to record under PSAB, but of course you don't pay them until the years in which you're actually paying them. So from a tax rate perspective, you don't budget until the year you're going to incur those costs. So the first one represents the landfill closure and post-closure liability for your two sites. And of course, with interest rates rising and discount rates rising as well, and being 1 year closer to closure on the one site, then of course your liability did decrease. And then your future employee benefits payable, that just represents a majority of the cost for paying for retiree benefits, and that is actuarially determined. And each year, of course, you budget for that anyway. So it's not like you need to lay out the 1.4 million. So yeah. So that is a summary of your liabilities. And then you have your bar graph showing that. Next, we come to the non-financial assets. And in your case, it's all your tangible capital assets that you own and hold and provide service to the ratepayers. And I guess if you could, you would try to turn them into cash, but some of them are hard to do. So, and then what is left over, of course, is your accumulated surplus. And we'll take a look at that a little later on. Following slide gives you an idea of the consolidated statement of operations, so your revenues and expenses. And the main point in this slide is to show you that when you take a look at your PSAB budget, you're showing that you've budgeted for a surplus, which under the tax rate calculations, you're not allowed to. So then the items down below, the acquisition of capital assets, amortization, gain on sale of assets and loan sale proceeds. And then really the main one is the use of reserve and reserve funds. From a PSAB perspective, they treat all your equity accounts as one, but when you set your budget, you treat them as a separate fund that you can utilize and take from and move to. And then as well, you also have your debt principal repayments that are not considered an expense under PSAB, but you still have to raise the money to pay them. So, and as you can see, it does come, all three columns do come down to zero at the end of the year, which with the use of your reserves, you can therefore the main township's surplus does come to zero. Next slide gives you an idea of your accumulated surplus to your tangible capital assets. And the one thing I always like to point out here, your goal here is to always have the orange bar to be larger than the blue bar, which means you have more equity than what you have tied up in your buildings. Next, you have your revenues and expenses and annual surplus on a PSAB basis. And you can see there that your revenues and your expenses have grown, and each year you've maintained an annual surplus. In years where you do not have a lot of capital funding or additional revenues, but you have a lot of amortization of your assets, don't be surprised if that gray bar dips below the line and into a deficit, because you're then utilizing some of the equity you've had set aside already. Next, we take a look at your revenues slides right out of the draft financial statements. Overall, you had slightly over budget. And you can see there the largest component is your property taxation. Next, your user charges. So keep in mind when we say user charges, almost half of that amount is tied up into water and sewer billings and charges. And then as well too, things such as building permits and fees at the landfill site and the recreational facilities are all flowing through there. So there's a number of items there that impact that total. I think you see that there was an increase more in the recreational areas, rec facilities with things being more open in 2022 than 2021, but some of your building permit fees were lower than they were in the past. And then you have your grants from Canada, Ontario, and other municipalities. And other municipalities, a large portion of that is related to your fire agreements with your neighboring municipalities. Overall, your investment income is higher than budgeted, and that's reflective of course, the increase in your rates. And the one thing to keep in mind too, the variance between budget to actual is under PSAB, you report all the interest, including the interest on your own reserves. Whereas I think when you budget, you only budget for the component that you're using in your operations. Next, in the prior year, you'll see that there was a large contributed capital asset related to the one storm management retention pond that you did acquire or assumed. And then as well too, you can see there you utilize developer contributions, or development charges. And then as well too, you can see the large use of the gas tax this year for both resurfacing and capital purposes. And the following slide gives you a pie chart of that. And as usual, for most rural municipalities, the property tax is the larger component. Next, we have where you spent your money on a PSAB basis. And you can see there with some things coming back post-pandemic, especially within the recreational and cultural services there, you can see the increase there from the prior year and from the budget. So therefore, there was additional revenues there. Overall, too, protection services includes policing, fire, building and bylaw. And the building and bylaw component was the lower portion there. Your transportation services very close to budget. And when we present that there, we also include the operations of the transit system in that line. Environmental services is water, wastewater, and including the landfill and diversion operations. And the big change there, of course, the change in the landfill liability, that decrease is flowing through that number, about 160,000. And then as well, planning and developments, just some costs weren't incurred as anticipated. So therefore, you're on this side, you were below budget, and then you get the same pie chart there. And then versus the different type of expenses is also presented, and this also presented in the detailed financial statements. And then you get the pie chart on that. And then we come to slide 19, which Then to me, the importance was $85.5 million in accumulated surplus. But when you take a look at this slide, you can see most of your surplus is tied up in your capital assets, less your debt, as well as certain departments too that are having operational deficits are listed there at the top. And then the unfunded amounts for landfill closure and employee future benefits, since you don't have to raise those monies, they're presented there as a deficit. So it's just the reserves and reserve fund portion that you do have set aside that you can utilize moving forward. And within the year increased slightly by about 400,000. And the one thing to note here, when you look at the environmental services, almost all of that reserve is set aside for a certain user group in water and sewer. So it's not available for general use. So it's still it does provide you the ability then to complete projects moving forward. And then one thing to keep in mind too, when you look at the invested in capital asset, your capital assets are recorded based on cost, less any amortization, so that it's not reflective of replacement costs of those assets, which in this day and age is probably significantly higher. So therefore, utilizing your asset management plan, your long-term capital plan, looking at your reserves and other development charges and the Canada Community Building Fund, and then you could put all those items together and figure out then where you need to go with your capital additions. And then you can see here just the additional details on the reserves. And next we have just some capital additions, and you can see there the largest component in roadways there. That is the largest addition. And keep in mind too, when we tabulated that larger orange pie, it does include both the Water Street additions, including both the water and sewer components that go with that. So, and then you can see there your additions versus amortization over time. So you can see there for 4 of the last 5 years, your additions were higher than your amortization. So that's good to see. And then we have just an analysis of the average useful life on your on your assets there. And you can see there the impact of newer additions to assets and higher costs versus some older costs you may have can greatly impact how green and red these bars are. And then finally, you have your net financial assets, and you can see there over the last 5 years, you have increased and still to it nicely, and a lot of that is reflective of the amount of reserves you have. So, and but still, it's still nice to see you're in the black, because the slide would go into red if you did dip below zero there. So it's always nice to be on that side of the line. So that's where things ended up at the end of the year.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. A great presentation. And of course, I want to thank too Lane and his staff and department for all the work they do to make your job easier too, I guess.
Sure.
Are there any questions? Deputy Mayor Black.
Thank you, through Mayor Sinnes. Yeah, great presentation, Richard. Thank you again for that. Just a couple of questions around, obviously investment policy is a big factor in last year's budget, going to be a bigger factor than this year's, hopefully, with that investment revenue hopefully being higher even in 2023. Now, it's from an accounting perspective, it's at cost, so you don't consider any of the deferred income. And again, I don't know from a timing point of view how far out some of these investments are going, but we could have that investment income only showing 2 years from now, 3 years from now. So I'd be interested to know what that unrealized gain, what those unrealized gains are annually in some kind of a report. I know it's not for this accounting report, but Do you have an idea what that number would be? I'm sure you dug into it a little bit more.
That is corrected and yeah, so in note 4 to the financial statements, yeah, the market value of all the investments is about 16, almost $17 million. So
Mhm.
and the recorded cost is what is it, 17 million. So they're like a lot of investments at the end of December with the way the markets went, it had declined the market value. So yeah, doing it based on cost, you'd see that decline. But with the changes upcoming in PSAB as well as part in the next year, it's for portfolio investments, you will be recording them at market value, not at cost. So
Okay.
you will be seeing that in the future. Yes.
The future, that's a change. That's a good change.
Yeah.
So just from an investment policy point of view, what is our investment policy with respect to risk levels? What kinds of things are we allowed to do? Is it legislated or is it up to the municipality or the council to determine what that level of risk is, or how does that work?
Sure. To you, Madam Mayor. We are restricted based on legislation for sure, but then we do have our own investment policy as well. I could provide that to the current council. We have about $3.5 million that's invested with the CIBC Trust, and then we have about $13 million in a GIC with CIBC. At this point, there's very low risk, and until we get our asset management plan to a point where completeness and confidence is a little bit higher level, then we probably don't want to go too far out in terms of what we want to invest in. There is a little bit of flexibility in terms of moving on to an investment vehicle through the municipal finance officers called the One Fund. But based on the last time we reviewed that, the CIBC GIC got a better short-term return.
Okay.
So that's why we went to that.
Okay.
But definitely there is legislative requirements, but then we do have our own policy within that.
All right, thank you for that. Just a follow up. With the landfill closure numbers, it was close to 700,000 as a liability, but it was only 500,000 last year. I thought that would just be an accumulating liability as we get closer to closure. It seems to fluctuate quite a bit from year to year. What's the factor there?
Well, one thing, the Ennismore side is 1 year closer to closure, ideally based on the assumptions. So if nothing changed, then it would have went down anyways, just for that one site. But with the changes in the discount factor and this then being done on a net present value, doing really the Smith site over time, and the higher discount factor actually then creates a lower present value, just based on the way the formulas work. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just and I think you've already commented on that. Sorry, just to follow up through, Mayor, with respect to again the tangible asset values. Your comment around the orange line being higher than the blue line. That's always going to be the case if we have reserves.
Yeah.
But the tangible asset value really is probably double what we currently are reporting, because you look at buildings like this, the arenas, most of our major infrastructure buildings are 20 plus years old, and would be written down probably almost 50% at this point. So replacement cost would be a lot higher, and I'm interested as we get into our asset management budget down the road, how that will work out.
Mhm.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Are there any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you again, Richard. We'll receive his presentation and then we're going to move on to Lane where we would approve. So can I have someone to Councillor Boyko and Deputy Mayor Blatt, all in favor? It's carried. Thank you. And
Sorry, so it's receive and approve.
Okay, because I thought maybe after Lane speaks, it's got the approval of the statements in his recommendation. Am I wrong?
I didn't know whether we were done. Okay, sorry.
Am I
I'm
doing it
quiet.
right? Thank you. All right, so now we'll move on to Babe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, through you, Richard definitely went through in receiving the report. I basically also received his presentation. I just wanted to outline in my report and the statements which are attached. You had outlined the work that Baker Tilly did, and they definitely work really well with our staff. I did want to draw council's attention to some ongoing investments they're making as their firm with respect to a portal, which allows us to upload our documents to it. We worked with them a long time. We are always talking about how we can improve working papers and things like that. That typically comes to our end. So Richard and I, or Veronica and I, may talk about how we can improve a working paper to make their review that much quicker. But at Baker Tilly, they've invested in an inflow portal, which allows us to upload all of our files. It ties in with the whole idea of going paperless. And it speeds up our whole process. And so Richard or Veronica provides a request for information at the very start of the audit. And it allows us to work through that in preparation for their on-site visit. And then back and forth through that. So just wanted to applaud their firm for continuing to make those investments to make things a little bit more efficient and transparent in our whole process. We've had a very good working relationship with them. And as Richard said, we haven't had any major disagreements, which is always good to not have a major disagreement with you already. But as recommended in the report, if you could just have a motion to receive the report and then definitely receive and approve the financial statements that would be posted on our website.
Thank you. So are there any questions of Lane? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion to receive and approve. Councillor Henry and Councillor Boyko, all in favor. That is carried. Thank you very much. And we're having another presentation by Richard on the role of the auditor.
All right. Good afternoon again. All right, so we put together a presentation just to discuss the role of the auditor and what the auditor's requirements are under the Municipal Act and who we are. So just quickly run through that. So first off, I guess I control this, don't I? Sorry. Under the Municipal Act, under 296(1), the municipality shall appoint an auditor licensed under the Public Accounting Act. And it's then to provide an audit on the accounts and transactions of the municipality and its local boards, and to express an opinion on that, and as well to performing other duties as required or requested by the municipality. So that's the reason why you are conducting the audit based on the Municipal Act. Who we are, Baker Tilly, KDN, LLP, all those letters. We do have the 4 offices, both in Peterborough, Lindsay, Curtis, and Coburg, and 19 partners, 120 staff, and of course myself and my colleague Joanna Park. We are predominantly working in the public sector area. We do have long-term relationships with our clients. We audit 4 counties, 1 city, and 33 lower tier municipalities. And as well too, we predominantly providing audit services and other assistance as required. And then conducting an audit. It is to do an audit of a general purpose financial statement audit. So when that is the purpose, and that's what we do as an audit. So we're not actually doing detailed internal control review. When we do the audit, we will look at your processes, and if we come across things that we think should be changed or could be improved, we will make you aware of those, but it's not a detailed internal control review, because of course our purpose is to report on the financial statements that they present fairly in all material respects in accordance with PSAB. So then as well too, So we follow the Public Sector Accounting Standards Handbook. And then, of course, we have a second handbook that we follow, which is Canadian Auditing Standards Handbook that we also follow. So the first one tells us how you account for it, and the second one then gives you the guidance on how you audit it. And then as well, too, the basic premise is that the municipality or the township will provide the audited financial statements, and then we will report on them. For most of those clients that we had listed there, I think only 1 out of 38 actually provides their own financial statements in a PSAB format. So we assist with that process as we conduct the audit. And then as well, our audit approach is done on a test basis. We don't look at all the transactions. We apply a risk-based audit approach where we look at and evaluate the operations and look at things that might contain more risk and address our audit work to that area. And then as well, too, utilizing materiality and statistical sampling, we then complete the amount of testing that we determine is necessary to issue our report. Normally, we do an interim audit. I guess during the pandemic and the way certain things went over the last 3 years, sometimes timing and availability of both your staff and our staff, sometimes they seem not everything went as normally intended, just from an overall basis. But still, normally do an interim audit in December and then complete the year-end audit in late February, ideally, or early March. We do offer a paperless approach, and we've been doing that since 2008, but we still seem to buy a lot of paper. So, but it is a goal we try to work to, and as Lane mentioned earlier, the use of the inflow software does facilitate then more electronic exchange of information. The auditor's responsibility then is going through and assessing the risks and looking for material misstatements, and then as well to examining on a test basis. So that's the one thing to keep in mind. We don't look at every transaction, so we do audit on a test basis based on sampling techniques, and then assessing the application of the accounting principles and assessing significant estimates made within the financial statements. And really, the two biggest ones in your case are the two unfunded liabilities, projecting out when your landfills might be done, the costs and when they might occur, as well too with the future costs on the future employee benefits and the future costs in there. Now, in that case, fortunately, the actuary does a lot of those analysis, and then we review that, and then we audit the information that was sent to the actuary. As part of the audit, we obtain an understanding of the internal control structure, as I said earlier, and looking how things flow and how the impact and the risk of the financial statements might be materially misstated as a result of fraud or error, or the internal controls in place to address such risks. And then as well, the also talks about council members' responsibilities, and they are listed there, being able to provide direction if you want us to look at anything in particular moving forward within the financial statement audits, meeting with the auditors prior to the release and approval of the financial statements, which I believe you just did, as well to reviewing matters raised by the auditor and with appropriate levels of management. And as I guess I didn't say earlier, but the audit went fine. We had no findings to report. So, and I believe that is covered in the letter that we had done. And then as well too, if you're aware of any disclosure or anything unique with within the township, then you are obligated to make us aware of any non-compliance, illegal acts, frauds, or intentional misstatements. Then as well too, if you provide, if you want us to look at anything specific, you do have that option. And as well too, then we do reporting back to management and council through management letter, as well as the audit reporting letter that was that went with the financial statement, draft financial statements, and then as well attendance at meetings. And then we talk about too, just the Public Sector Accounting Board, just a bit of history. Prior to 2000, financial statements were much easier for comprehension in the fact that financial statements were presented in the same format that you budget. So therefore, capital expenses were all just treated as an expense. Things such as that, development charges were a reserve fund. But then over time, through the Municipal Act of, they said you're supposed to follow what is allowed under the Canadian Institute of Chartered Accountants and their recommendations, and municipalities then fall under PSAB. Then one of the bigger changes in 2009 when all municipalities had to start following PSAB, and then as well too that implemented, and that was a fair bit of work trying to generate all that information and then getting that in your financial statements and estimating what it costs you to build or construct buildings whenever they were constructed. And then as well too, the implementation of both the full accrual accounting, then accounting for the unfunded liabilities that you have. And then as well, moving forward for 2023 is the asset retirement obligation. So this is a new section that also then incorporates changes to the financial instruments section and the investment section. So that's all rolled into that will be the investments being reported at market value as part of this change. And this change was deferred a couple of years during the pandemic. So it's now coming into effect. So this is new, and it does relate to your assets and the ability then for you to go through and see what type of liabilities you may have associated with those assets. And then if they fall under this section, there needs to be a legal obligation to incur costs to retire the tangible capital asset. There must have been a past event or transaction that occurred. It is expected that they'll have to, in essence, pay for something to get this taken care of, and a reasonable estimate can be made. So the and is bold and underlined because you have to meet all four conditions. Therefore, that's when you record the liability. And then what is a legal obligation? Legal obligation can result from agreements or contracts. I think the biggest one for you will be legislation of another government, and then perhaps your own legislation or rules. And then if you've agreed to something within a contract, that could also commit you to do that as well. And then what could it uncover and include related to the retirement obligation, decommissioning or dismantling a TCA that was required, remediation of contamination of a TCA by its normal use, post-retirement activities such as monitoring and constructing another asset to perform post-retirement activities. The last three items could be more applicable. For landfills, of course, you do have to monitor and post-closure monitoring. Some landfills, municipalities that we audit, of course, then also have leachate collection system and treatments because of the amount of stuff that needs to be treated coming out of the landfill. So that would include then point D there. So and really the big thing, of course, in point A is, of course, you need to decommission or dismantling a TCA that I'll talk about maybe a little later on the following slide. So then what would be included? Buildings with asbestos, landfills, underground fuel storage tanks, septic tanks, PCBs or hazardous waste. And then maybe wastewater or sewage treatment facilities. Those ones would might be all pertain to the township. I think they're the one thing to keep in mind. Of course, we audit a number of school boards, and of course, their year end is before yours. So, and the Ministry of Education has provided them a lot of guidance, and what they're finding is that buildings with asbestos is the largest category. And of course, that can be in any type of insulation, ceiling tiles, floor tiles, things such as that. And then as well, underground fuel storage tanks. Now in discussion with Lane, he wasn't aware that you had any, but and as well too, the one thing to keep in mind, salt storage sheds sometimes will contaminate the ground, so you do have to keep that in mind as well. So, but I guess the big thing here is just to conceptualize what the liability is. Now, there's no guarantee that you will have to actually remediate the property. So because of course, right now, the asbestos legislation is there. So, I mean, you can sell a building right now without necessarily having to clean it up. It's just, you have to make people aware of that. So, the standard says that you do record the liability based on what the current contaminant identified is. But down the road, if you're able to sell the property without having to clean it up, well, then you may not, you would not have to incur that liability. It's just under PSAB, it's just identifying the liability and recording it. So that's perhaps the difference between the reality and the conceptual part of the standard. So. And I'm not sure if anybody had any questions on that.
That's the end of the presentation.
Yeah.
Are there any questions for Richard? Deputy Mayor Black?
Thank you, through Mayor Sennis. Just a couple, just to finish up on the asset retirement obligation, will that be part of the asset management review to come up with those numbers? Because we don't have those numbers right now, right?
So through you, Madam Mayor, we do have some additional work to do on the AROs. We do have a facility review underway right now, and it's hoped by some of those, it's the architectural firm that's doing the review. So it's hoped that that will provide some of the basis for those conceptual costs and those types of things. And we'll be reporting on that.
Okay, thank you. Just a quick follow-up to cybersecurity through your audit. Is there any focus on cybersecurity as part of your audit review? I know
Yes.
it's a big issue in a number of
Yes.
municipalities right now.
Yes, and
Do we do anything in our audit with respect to cybersecurity?
that is part of our requirements under Canadian auditing standards is to look at those things and assess the risks there. And what we do then also is we utilize the use of our person in our consulting company that is a cybersecurity specialist, and he's worked with the township. Was it 1 or 2 years ago in that manner, and then probably then we'll come back and look at that too, because I know you've had a change in staffing as well there, so it might be a good time then to look at that as well with the new person in place. Yep.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I would like someone to move that we receive this part of the presentation. Deputy Mayor Black and Councillor Boyko. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Richard.
All right, thank you.
We have question period now. Were there any questions that were registered? Thank you.
No questions.
Thank you. We'll move on to our report from Janice LaValle on water and wastewater services.
Thank you. Try and speak right into the mic here. So this is further to the report that came before council on February 14th. At that time, you did direct us to go away and come back with a further report that would outline the transition plan and financial analysis related to bringing the provision of water and wastewater services in-house. So the report does go through all of those steps and considerations, and I'll just summarize each very briefly. So first off, we'd have a termination of the current contract with PUG. That contract provides that it can be terminated with 12 months notice by either party. So once council made a decision, we would immediately notify PUG of that decision. That 12-month notice period would provide us with a good timeline to make sure that we could have everything in place and have the transition process complete to take over the operations. The province, through the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, does regulate municipal drinking water systems to ensure water quality and safety. It must be an accredited operating authority that's in charge of the drinking water system. So the municipality would need to become that accredited operating authority. To do that, you need to establish your quality management system and make sure that it addresses all of the elements of the drinking water quality management standard. And then accreditation is actually granted via third-party audit of your quality management system that ensures you have the required documentation in place and that functionally you're doing what you said that you were going to do. The existing QMS that we have for the system was developed as part of the PUG contract and would continue to form the basis of our QMS. We would have to go through and make any revisions required, but we have good documentation in place that would support that process already. Certainly the licenses that are required, the township's existing licenses are in good standing, subject to renewal June of 2026. And again, we would need to amend those to identify the township as the accredited operating authority. So in looking at the organizational structure, we have considered the structure that would be needed to cover the operational needs as well as any on-call needs for the system. It would provide for 4 full-time staff, all of whom would be licensed operators, and that includes 1 supervisory position. And of course, these operations would fall under the Public Works Department, and our manager of Public Works, who is a fully licensed operator, would support that operation as well. And it is anticipated that he would retain those credentials. Certainly, as part of the process, we look for any synergies in our existing public works resources to make sure we're delivering services as effectively as possible and taking advantage of any synergies there. In addition to that, there would be a finance administration position that would facilitate the billing functions and the general administrative and customer service support. It is important to note that all costs related to the delivery of the water and wastewater services would be appropriately allocated to those departments. There would be a transitionary period required where the new township staff would work alongside existing PUG staff to gain familiarity with the facilities, equipment, and operations. Having said that, just keep in mind that we do have the manager of Public Works and as well our water and sewer project coordinator who will be very well versed in our facilities and the operations as well. We have conducted a bit of an inventory to identify the supplies and equipment that would be required to provide the services. It's anticipated that we would need to purchase a couple of vehicles and some miscellaneous small items, analytical equipment, office equipment, that sort of thing. Space at the water treatment plant is currently utilized for staff, and there's space at the Lakeville Public Works yard that could be utilized for storage of equipment, materials, that sort of thing. There may be some minor modifications to that space required, lockers, partitions, that sort of thing. So those one-time transitional costs would be funded through a transfer from reserve. And the replacement costs, say for the vehicles, would be built in with an annual contribution in your operations budget, similar to what we do with Robert's Department of Building and Planning. Certainly, another key component would be the data and information transfer. We'd work closely with PUG to complete that transition. Many of the relevant records are already available to the township through ShareFile and through our SCADA system. So that will really support a fairly simple and seamless transition in terms of that data and information. On the billing side of things, I did mention there would be a position included to facilitate that work. We currently have an agreement that's outside of this operating agreement with PUG to manage the billing and customer service for us. With this change, that service would no longer be available. And I think we would want to bring that in-house regardless. So that would be rolled into our financial and customer service model here at the township office. This piece of the transition would have to happen earlier. We're anticipating it would have to be put into effect by the end of this year because PUG is going through a major upgrade of their software systems now. So it would not make any sense to bring the township's accounts into that new software system. And just in thinking about that process, I think as part of that, the township probably would move to a bi-monthly billing system as opposed to a monthly billing system that would be much more efficient and effective administratively and more consistent with what happens across other utilities in the province. And of course, there'd always be various payment options available to the customers to make their payments as works best for them. And certainly we would bring forth a further report to council that just kind of gives you a little bit more detail around the billing and those options so that we can have that all set up very efficiently. Of course, as with any other major change, communications would be key throughout the process, and we would develop a detailed communication plan. We'd use various methods of communication, making sure that there's a seamless transition and that people always have the appropriate contact information that they need. We'd use direct communications with the customers and the property owners. We could use social media. We could use the township website, advertising, signage, FAQs, the whole 9 yards of communication, I think would come into play with this change. And certainly we do recognize that the financial impact of moving to an in-house service delivery is a very important component for council's consideration. We did prepare a financial analysis of the option for you and also consider the startup costs that would be required. So I'll just hand things over to Lane just for some high-level comments on that financial analysis, and then we'll be available for any questions you might have.
Sure. Through you, Madam Mayor. Thanks, Janice. So I'll just provide just a brief overview of the analysis that was provided to council, and just kind of go through the layout and why it is presented in the way that it is. The 2023 budget is provided there just really as a basis for reference and comparison. We know already that the budget in 2024 will be significantly different than 2023, but we need some frame of reference to take a look at. And just a reminder, as outlined there, this is for operations only. Capital and reserve allocations really won't be affected by what we're talking about. We still have our program to work through. We're working through our asset management plan, and so those allocations wouldn't be significantly affected. The PUG estimate column was created really through initial discussions with PUS. We know that preferred pricing or savings that we have in our existing agreement will not be entertained in 2024. Some of those fixed pricing areas would be with respect to service connections, fixed crew rates. If we have a water main break or things like that, our existing agreement is very, very competitive. Fixed crew rates, they've always said that they're not interested in entertaining that in the future. And I would expect that costs related to locate services would likely have an impact as well. We initially had that in our initial agreement. We negotiated that out so that it was included, and they've now contract that service out, so it's likely that would have an impact. We have built in a number of what I've just classified as market change estimates in that number as well. Fortunate that Adam has provided some great background information to put this together as well. So that's kind of the basis of that column. The in-house, building a new budget for this in-house operation that's used a combination of costs that were the basis for the contract, keeping in mind some of those categories that we had in the contract have been in place for many years. But we've also included some new estimates for staffing and equipment. And as mentioned, Adam's there to do a bunch of work on that. Our team has had the benefit over the last number of years of actually actively observing the US or PUG operations. We've been monitoring SCADA and considering areas for savings. And so our goal overall here would be to maximize savings, not only in the operation, but taking a look at how our capital investments have been made over the years. Specifically, we've made a lot of capital investments with respect to energy efficiency. So you really need to be invested in the program to really realize those energy efficiencies. So we feel that there'll be some operational savings here from the past capital investments and also ongoing ones. And in terms of the percentage increase for expenses, once again, it's for reference only, but you see that there is an increase in operational expenses expected. But I could assure council that any rate changes that would be necessary would be based on our standard overall approach, which is slow and steady growth. We're not really big believers in spikes and valleys in terms of how we present that type of thing. Our asset management plan, as it becomes more refined, I would like to lay out a longer term vision for capital investments. But once again, as I mentioned, that those capital investments typically have an operational impact, and when we make those investments, they're really sound, well thought out, and they typically have some operational savings as well. The notes that I've provided there at the bottom, just to provide some additional detail, in case council had any questions for that. But maybe I'll leave that there, and I think Chance and I would be prepared for any questions.
All right, thank you, Wayne. Yes,
Sorry, just want to let you know, even though you can't see Mary, she's still with us. She can hear what's going on. So if she has a question, she'll just speak up.
okay.
Yeah, and the public can see her. We just have an issue with this particular computer talking to our PowerPoint presentation. So-
Okay. All right. Well, let's start first with Mary. Do you have any questions, Mary? No. All right. Thank you. We'll move to Councillor Boyko.
Thank you. Mary is there somewhere.
Yeah.
Black screen.
We can hear her.
Okay. Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. A couple of questions. The first, and thank you very much for this report. And I know we began this conversation in February, so thank you very much for bringing all of this information forward. With respect to just about everything that we look at, we're looking at risk reward. And I want a sort of a philosophical question that we could get into the weeds if you wish in your answer. What is the risk? Is there a risk of staying with the PUG?
Well, I think there is the risk of some uncertainty around the future with PUG, as we spoke to in the February report. Certainly the city has commissioned a report about taking their water services back in-house to coincide with their wastewater and their storm. City council didn't really deal with that when the report came forward. So whether or not that comes forward in this term will yet to be seen. But I think the risk is that there's decisions out there that we have no control over that could be made that then have a significant impact on our contract and our operations. To me, that would be the risk. Again, I think as Elaine has mentioned, we do know that with another contract, they would be looking at it a little bit differently as well. So I think there is some risk in terms of that financial component and potential increases in costs that we may see that again, we have limited control over, and maybe that the opportunity cost as a risk in terms of us, as the in-house service, being able to take advantage of some of those capital investments we've made and find some operational savings. So some financial benefit that way might be an opportunity cost.
I understand. Thank you. And what you've just said with respect to the risk leads to obvious rewards of going on our own. Thank you. With respect to the financial analysis through you, Madam Mayor, I guess to Lane, what you just went through on the report, Genesis report number 3, it talked about possibly hiring 2 new people. Now, if we are to purchase a couple of new vehicles, I see the vehicles and equipment, $34,000. And then on the Genesis report, it says the possibility of purchasing 2 new vehicles and equipment. Purchase of 2 new vehicles and equipment, $34,000. I don't understand that number.
No, so it's you, Madam Mayor. So our typical process for purchasing capital items like that in terms of vehicles would be that the initial upfront purchase would be from reserve.
Yeah.
And then on an annual basis, we would have annual charge outs, and those
Right.
charge outs should not only pay for the maintenance, fuel, licensing, all that type of thing, but also the eventual replacement.
Right.
So really, if you look at the $34,000 and then that differential under transfers, the $25,000,
That's what
that amount on an ongoing basis would really replace those vehicles eventually as well. So the initial purchase would come out of reserve.
Right.
That's
Gotcha.
consistent with our other departments.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, thank you. And my third and final question, I promise, is with respect to full-time staff. Again, if I'm understanding correctly, in Genesis report number 3, it talked about an administrative position, possibly a general administrator. So we're talking about hiring 2 new people. Is that, am I interpreting that properly, or would it be people who are redeployed?
No, so it's a little more than that. So we'd have 4 new full-time positions operationally,
Yes.
as well, one of those being a supervisory position, as well as 1 new administrative financial type position.
Okay, so thank you. And so with approximately $100,000 in savings, would the people who are using this service and pay for it every month or twice a month, would they see any savings on their water and sewer bills as a result of this move?
So if we're talking about a savings of what's existing, I would say.
If we bring it all in-house, I'm not asking for a specific number, but would the people who are using the services, would they see a savings? Would it remain approximately the same? Would it end up going up? What would be the advantage to the people who are on it now? What would they see as an advantage?
Okay, yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. So I can see where you go with the question. So, yeah, I would say in terms of a savings, they shouldn't notice a significant, if any, increase in the first few years. Asset management would probably drive a change more than what we're talking about. As you can see there in terms of the comparison, I think the PG estimate and that increase would be significantly higher.
Yeah.
So going in-house is more advantageous financially, for sure.
Right. That was part of the risk question I was asking before. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, yes, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you through you, Mayor Senes. Thanks for the report. I won't repeat some of the comments that Councillor Boyko mentioned, but obviously the risk side of it is the biggest concern for me. I think the financial benefit until we actually get operations up and running and see these are estimates. So I wouldn't want anybody to think that their rates are going to go down by 8% upfront. Long term, as you say, I think there is probably a benefit there, but as per the consulting report, the rates in Lakefield are already below the median for similar towns our size. So I think that's a positive moving forward. So I do believe that the financial side of it, I think could be a benefit, but I don't want anybody to think again that that's going to result in a lower rate for water and sewer. It may, but we can't guarantee that. So the biggest issue is quality management. Obviously, I was delighted to see that our last report came in with 0 deficiencies in it. So I think we're in a positive position with respect to timing moving forward. If there were a lot of deficiencies and issues there, I'd have some concerns about bringing in new staff and so on. But I think we have a good solid platform and basis for making that move at this time. So again, from a risk management point, I understand that Adam has a level 3 or whatever is required. Is there a plan to, when we hire these new folks, the supervisors, that they have the credentials? Or are we going to have to train them? Or we're going to have to provide them, which will be obviously a time factor to get those people up to speed as well.
Yeah, for sure. So we would advertise for the positions with the qualifications required. In some instances, it's similar to what we've done with building officials in the past. If they aren't fully certified, then we would support them through the rest of that training requirement. But for sure, we would be looking for people who are certified or who at least have are moving along that direction.
And so to be clear, from the additional staffing required, we're really just replacing the PUC folks that are doing the work today. We're not adding any people.
We're adding
Really?
people to our complement, but
But
yes,
not-
we're really just replacing the people that are doing the
That are
work
doing the
now.
work
who work for
today.
somebody
Okay,
else.
so
Yeah.
just to be clear that
Yeah.
that's the case. We're not adding 5 new bodies to our head count, really technically. So, and from a software point of view, I think your report said the current accounting software has a billing program that we can use. We're not going to incur $100,000 software bill moving forward, because that is always very expensive.
Yeah, so our new software system, and I never call it the right name, but yes, it does have a utility billing module built into it that is available to us at no charge.
Great.
Of course, we have to populate the data
Yeah.
and that sort of thing, but no, the actual software is available to us.
Yeah, and in my experience, the challenge of bridging that data in is always the toughest part, and where organizations lose revenue because of it. So it's important to make sure that that link is built.
Yeah, through your Madam Mayor, we definitely have had kind of preliminary discussions with US. Keep in mind that we have originally provided that information to them, and we had an audit process to go through, and on the way back would be similar process to ensure we have sign off.
Yeah, the data is 100% coming back. Perfect. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, I have a couple. Just for clarity, again, because it seems there's still a bit of confusion. Going with this change, we will be adding 4 full-time employees and 1 finance person. So there'll be 5 in total.
It would be 4 new positions in total,
Yes.
because that number includes our existing water and sewer project coordinator. So there'd be 2 new operators, 1 new supervisor, and 1 finance admin position.
So 4 in total.
Yeah.
Okay. And will they all be located over at the Lakefield Water Treatment Plant, because we have a need for space here?
I think that the one area where we would want somebody to be located here would be the finance and admin position to integrate with our front counter customer service model.
And do we have room for that person?
We'd have to work that through the process. Yeah.
Okay. And as far as Woodland Acres goes, will there be any change for that group?
Certainly, our new operation would take care of the Woodland Acres distribution system as well. So certainly the water supply would still come from the city, the sewer would go to the city, but our staff would be maintaining the distribution systems.
Okay, just for clarity.
Yeah.
So what you're telling us is, in making this change, and again, I'm just trying to clarify so that if this goes out to the public through the media, that the public understands, they would be getting their bill from us and not PUG, correct?
Yes.
And that just because we're making this change doesn't mean that their rates will go up.
No, as Lane has mentioned, we really have like that slow and steady progress in terms of our charges. We wouldn't see a change or anticipate a change in that approach. Certainly looking forward, we think that not that it would be a decrease in rates, but we do think looking forward that it would mitigate future cost increases from an operational perspective.
Okay, I think that's important to make clear to the public. Thank you. If there are no further questions, I will call the vote. So I need someone to move the recommendation that's before us. Okay, moved by Councillor Boyko, seconded by Deputy Mayor Black. And Mary, are you in favor of this?
Yes.
All right, and all those that are here in favor. That is carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to Robert Kelly's report here on the Rogers Telecommunication Tower. Robert.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My report before you today is a little bit long awaited. We first brought this to the previous council's attention in July of last year. The township was approached by a consultant working on behalf of Rogers that proposed a telecommunications tower to be located on our lagoon property at the edge of Lakefield there. The report today is seeking to receive township approval to enter into the agreement and to request that CRINS, Canadian Radio Telecommunications Information and Notification Service, to expeditiously process this application and to enter in to sign a bylaw to enter into the agreement with Rogers to move this project forward. The high level details of the agreement are included in the report, which is an annual lease payment to the township to the benefit of currently initially $10,000 per annum, and the ability for the township to co-locate on the tower at no additional cost for our telecommunications equipment for water service, water sewer services, as well as public works and fire. And if council had any specific questions with regard to any of that, I'd be more than happy to attempt to answer them.
Okay, I think it's great that we would be able to locate our equipment on this. That's wonderful at no charge. You might not be able to answer this question, but we have horrible cell service on the 8th line. Doesn't matter who you're talking to, you lose them. Will this help?
My understanding, based on the communication that we've received from Rogers, is that they have considerable voids in their overlap in the system. So if, initially it would boost any Rogers clientele cell service signals considerably over a fairly substantial area where there is I guess a very large and growing population base. If they don't have any other telecommunications operators co-locate on the tower, it's not going to benefit users of the TELUS or Bell Networks or the other networks out there.
Okay, thank you. Not the answer I wanted to hear, but Deputy Mayor Black.
That's for you, Mayor Sennis. Yeah, that's obviously always a concern, and I think the legislation requires that Rogers would allow them for a price to be on the tower. So, but it's up to your Bell or your TELUS to push them to add to the tower. With respect to the same issue, what about the county being able to put their roads equipment on the tower as well? What my county had on here, they're always looking for better coverage. Is that something we could include in the agreement, that the township or county can include their equipment? I'm not saying they're going to, but.
Yeah, I think that might be a big ask. I think we did have to do some negotiations to get where we're at.
Yeah.
For our own benefit.
Can we ask? The worst thing they can say is no. That's always been my.
We can ask
From the county first if they.
Yeah,
need
if they need it. Yeah.
Yeah, we can make the ask. I just say, don't hold your breath.
Yeah.
Okay. No, well, I mean, I think the mayor's right. We probably should have the county involved, obviously, if they need it or not, but.
For sure. So we can reach out and have that conversation with the county and then follow up with Rogers and see where that's
Great.
at.
Thank you.
They may agree to having the equipment. They may not agree to having it for free. So that would be the other. It might provide them an option. It just might not provide them a free option.
Right. Thank you.
I don't see any other questions. Mary, did you have one?
No, not regarding this one.
Thank you very much. All right, I'm looking for a mover and seconder of the recommendation. Councillor Henry, Deputy Mayor Black, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. We'll move on to Megan Larocque.
Thank you. Through you. My report speaks to the council communicator. This is an annual publication that council puts out. It's an 8-page newsletter that gets mailed out to all of the property owners in Selwyn Township. You've all received a hard copy, so I'll be looking to you for any edits or feedback. But I did want to bring forward was look at the publication of the council communicator moving forward. So in my report, I've offered up 3 options, and I'll go through those briefly. The first option was having the design of the council communicator done in-house, having 2,500 copies printed and having those distributed to locations throughout the township. It could be grocery stores, pharmacies, locations that people frequent quite often. And that could be where people pick up their physical copy rather than having it mailed directly to them. In this instance, that allows people that actually want to have a physical copy, they can go get it. If they don't want one, they don't have to go get one. They could always ask for it emailed or look at it on our website. Option 2 would be to have third-party design. So currently that's the Herald does that for us. We provide them with the articles, the photos, the graphics, and then they design it for us. And then also having 2,500 copies printed and distributed in the same manner. Option 3 would be the continuation of the council communicator in the same format currently. So that's the Herald doing the design, the mailing, and then it's sent out to all of the property owners. In my report, I also outlined the financial impact of the council communicator. So currently it costs approximately $17,000 per year for this publication. That does not include staff time that's required to write, edit, and finalize articles. And then the environmental impact, I've included as well, working with Lily Morrow, our sustainability coordinator. So briefly, it's about 10,500 kilometers driven by an average gasoline-powered passenger vehicle. And that's for the production, delivery, and disposal of a newspaper. So yeah, if you have any questions, I'm happy to try and answer
You're
them.
losing your voice?
I am a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm thirsty, yeah.
Before I go to my colleagues, I've got a bit of a bias here because the council communicator was born as a result of the first time I ran for office here in Selwyn. I knocked on every door in Smith because I was running for Smith Ward Councillor. And the questions that I got just blew me away. They would say, I don't even know who my councillor is now. Where's the municipal office? Which threw me. There were so many questions that it was obvious there was a disconnect. And after I was successful in becoming the Smith Ward councillor, I came back to our council and told them about it. And the council communicator was born. So I think that it's an excellent product. You've done a great job again. It looks really good. It's the one piece of the one product that everyone in the township gets, and they're made aware of what happens over the course of a year. And another thing I've always continued to say, and Janice and Angie know this, is that we don't bang our own drum enough. And in this particular piece of product, we're banging our drum. We're letting people know what's been done by council and staff over the previous year. And so I would be supporting option 3, not that I'm trying to influence you at all. So anyways, we'll go first to Councillor Henry.
Thank you. Through your, actually, I was just going to give a motion to approve on your recommendations. Actually, just a question for you. So you're in charge of marketing and things for the township. Obviously, things are shifting more towards social media instead of print media. And from what I'm reading, obviously with the costs and then the environmental impact having on paper, this is a concern, and we'd want to see us transitioning to more of an e-friendly format. With the second highest concentration of seniors in the country, can we have it in large print as well? That's my only concern, is that there's going to be a transitionary period, I think, on this that we're going to have to consider, and that's going to have to be phased in over possibly 2 or possibly a couple of decades. I don't know, because we're still attracting the seniors to our area, and they're not always here during the winter months, and they forward their mail down south.
Yeah, there is the option to increase the font of this. Of course, with that, you always end up losing space as well, because the cost is fixed at 8 pages is kind of what we've always done. So that is definitely something we can do, always keeping in mind, obviously, less information.
Through you, Mayor, in response, that was, yeah, I guess that was tongue in cheek on my part. And obviously we can have a reference that when you go online, you can read it in large print clearly. As the nodding heads tell me. So what can we do is setting up a plan though, maybe looking at how we transition into a digital format. Can we take a look at what we are doing on social media and how much of an impact it's having? Which I think it is having an impact, especially if we use the older platforms, Facebook, right? Which everyone's grandparents seem to be on nowadays. I'm almost a grandparent, relax. So yeah, I think that might be something we have to consider here in the future.
Yeah, and I will say, like, with any publication, as soon as you put it out, it's a little bit dated. So we do try to keep it as current as possible, or at least look at the most popular things that have been put out on social media. For example, our food cycler was a huge hit. Even though I think we've put it out time and time again, we've included it in this publication again, just to get people to remember like the good things that council and the township does. But yes, like you said, social media is always kind of first go for those who do use it, just to be up to date in the quickest way possible.
Okay, so just for clarification for myself, you were making a motion. What was your motion?
Thank you. Recommendation 3.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
In support.
All right. Deputy Mayor Black.
I will second that motion, but I have some questions as well. Obviously, one of the largest costs will be mailing costs. Can you tell us how that works? Is it a householder, which is cheaper, or are we directly mailing to people that don't have an address in the township? Is that what's happening?
So we actually do a bit of both. So we do bulk mail to the areas within our township. It doesn't incorporate everybody. So then those people who aren't incorporated into that are directly mailed. So we do have about 2,000 people who receive it directly mailed to them, and about 12,000 as part of the bulk mail. So that direct mailing does also include property owners who are overseas, the US, and for example, we have some areas that have a Peterborough address, but they are in Selwyn. So they would be not part of that bulk mail as well.
Right. So out of the 17,000, what's the mailing cost? I guess either for the drop or the actual mail cost of the.
So approximately about 5,300. You could say 5,500.
5,500 is the mailing cost.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. How do we, again, through with Councillor Henry's comments with regards to environment and all those sorts of things, there are people in Dover that have Lakefield KOL 2HO. Are they getting it a drop? How do we control that? Because it's a significant number.
We actually, so what we do is we have a mailing database that we send to the Herald based on all of our property owners. And then what they do is they kind of compare, I believe, between the bulk mail and that list. And then those people who could be in Lakefield, but are actually in Dover get scrubbed from that list.
Okay, so then none of it's going over there, wasted, so on. And the last comment I'll make is I'm supporting it because to another organization, we organized a public meeting. We had it all on our social media. We walked around to neighbors and gave pamphlets out to neighbors to notify them. And I got a call 2 days after the event saying, why wasn't I notified? And so my comment was, you know what, social media, we walked around to some of the neighbors. I'm sorry we didn't get to you that far away, but it's on social media. She says, well, I'm not on the internet. I'm 93. And the only way I get information is through the mail. So there are, to Councillor Henry's comment, we do have a large senior population who aren't necessarily that savvy on social media. So over a period of time, you know, the next generation will be. I think we have to take that into consideration, and that's one reason I'm supporting continuing with the hard copy at this point. Thank you.
Councillor Boyka.
I will support it as well. I think it is impossible for us to over communicate. I think we need to do everything we can to communicate. And that's why I support the mailing, because just because we put something on our website, we can't assume anybody's going to see it. Just because we put it on social media, we can't assume anybody's going to see it. I think the mailing is where most people will probably see something. So therefore, it's worth the price of doing this once a year. The second thing I want to do is compliment you. It's a terrific piece. I think it's great. I've done a lot of writing in my life, and putting something together like this is hard, especially when you're writing by committee. There is nothing harder. So thank you so much for what you're doing. If you could pass that to me, there's one question, because you did use the word draft, which is dangerous, because that means you're still inviting comment. There are on the front here, there's going to be, I assume, a picture of us on our tour. And I'm one to say that I think there's already enough picture. I'll just say me. There's already enough pictures of me in this thing that we don't need another one. Is there the possibility, though, that we could put some hard information there, drawing from Richard Stegenga's report? I'm thinking about Lane putting 2 of those pie graphs on, where here are our expenses, here is our revenue. I think that would be really helpful for the people of Selwyn to see some hard information like that, rather than one more picture of my mug. I think it'd be much more powerful. And I apologize for just when you think you're about to put it to bed, here's this guy making another suggestion for a change. But that's my suggestion to be considered.
Yeah,
Thank you.
if council is on board with that, we could definitely make that change. And I'm sure Lane would love to put some finance stuff in there.
Yeah, just to, I'm not asking for a big financial, but the 2 that have already been invented, they're there. But just so people could see all this tax money that I put up, where does it go? Here's where it goes.
Yeah.
Here's where the revenue comes from. Some hard facts. I think that'd be valuable.
Before I go to Councillor Henry, Councillor Koulis, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, I've got 3 separate things. Does Henry, did you want to go in? Sorry, Councillor Henry, did you have something to add on to what's already been said? I'm just wondering if I should go second.
No, you go ahead, and then we'll come back to Councillor Henry.
Okay. So my first question is, we've noted that staff hours are outside of all of these estimates. Do we have that information on hand today?
Yeah, so I was looking at kind of all of our hours put together. So I'd approximate about 35 hours for staff to get the articles together, edit the back and forth with the editing of the actual draft communicator. I'd approximate 35 hours for that.
Okay, and so how much financially does that add to each option? I'm just wondering if that changes the financial side of things.
If I'd say approximately $1,500 was my approximation for that 1 week of staff time.
Yeah. Okay, and then the second part is, there seems to be assumptions on if this is working or not versus online versus in person and being mailed. Do we have any stats on how much is directly being accepted? I'm wondering if we need part of this transition that Councillor Henry's talking about is an inventory. Is there any way to measure if this is actually information dissemination actually getting to people, and how we can change that in the long term?
The only thing I could think of is we'll have a collection of council communicators at the office. We could count how many we have here, how many go out to people. The only way really to see if people are actually taking it home with them would be to go to the post offices and see how many are being tossed aside with their flyers. Whether or not that's something that staff would be willing to do, to go and count blue box flyers, I'm not sure that that's possible.
Okay, I'm just wondering too, if there's any comparable municipalities around us or, elsewhere in Ontario who do similar things, and if they have inventories or way to monitor. Because if we don't make this transition sooner, I think we should still be measuring our impact environmentally.
I could always put some thought to it and see if there's any other way we could, but I just at a quick thought, no, I can't think of anything beyond that.
Okay. Yeah, so like in the short term, just to like voice my opinion, because I know you can't see my facial expressions here. I do support keeping it the way it is, but like the others, I am interested in a transition. I just want to make sure that the transition has accountability and transparency, not only to us, but as well to the residents who are getting it or not receiving it. And that's it for me.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Councillor Henry now.
Thank you through your Mayor Senes. Not to drag this out any longer, but this will probably be the first year that the council communicators and actually, or parts of it, aren't taped on the fridge in my house, only because my face will be on it. The extra dump card is there. And because I work in a lot of different people's homes, there are homes that still roll that way. There's either a magnetic board and these things are up. It can be an educational tool used within the home. And with that, if we want to track how the printed version works of this, put a contest in it that needs a response. Do something that demands a response. Because you can get Facebook
Maybe
likes and
next
all
year. And we're not going to go back to the drawing board
Thank
too
you.
many times here. Can you speak to the transition you were talking about, please, Councillor Henry?
Thank you through your Mayor Senes. When mentioning that we have the second highest concentration of seniors in the country, I think that we have to be respectful of them not being tech savvy. And that requires printed copy for them. Also with that, a lot of them travel outside of the country and receive their mail out of the country. So it gives them an opportunity to still get a copy of the council communicator, which at the same time does a couple of things for us. It actually promotes our community outside of Selwyn when it's being mailed outside of the community, because other people will see it at some point in time. The transition to going fully electronic, in my opinion, is going to take 20 or 30 years. We may have to downsize it. If we run a contest, we can have some more numbers to run on to see if it's truly effective. Everyone, well, not everyone, but what politician doesn't love a photo op? So realistically, it's going to have to be in a printed format for a period of time, I believe, just because of the age and the way the demographics aging, and we're attracting more seniors to the area.
Okay, thank you. So we have a mover and seconder. I'll call the vote. The motion before us is to go with option 3. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. We will now move on to consent items. And are there any items that people want to be pulled? Mary, you got item you want to be pulled?
No, sorry, it's number 10. It's not under number 9. Right, like consent, does consent include number 10 and 11?
No.
Oh, sorry. I had texted you number 8B and I meant 10A. I had the wrong one.
Okay, so you want to pull 8A?
No, 10A.
Okay. We will get to that. Councillor Boyko?
I wish to pull one from number 6, correspondence for discussion.
6A?
6A, and it's item 13, the letter from the Board of Education.
Okay, so we will go to 6A. There's nothing else that anyone wants to pull? Okay. So number 13 is letter from the Kawartha Pine Ridge District School Board on Ridpath School. Councillor Boyko.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor Senes. Something that has interested the people in Lakefield, people in Selwyn in general, is what will happen to Ridpath School. It's been closed for a number of years. since they closed the high school and moved the elementary school kids over there. And one school was in there for a couple of years, and now it's been sitting empty. And now it looks like the Board of Education is looking to sell the property. And for a number of years, for decades, in fact, the people in the area have been using that area, their outside area, open space for a number of ways when school is not in session. And my hope is that if that property is sold, that the people of that area would continue to be able to use that outdoor space. So I am prepared to present a motion to asking that the Board of Education contact anyone who is interested in purchasing that space with our intent, our desire that that space will somehow be able to be continued to be used by the people of that area. So my motion reads as follows, that I would like to make: that a letter be sent from the Township of Selwyn to the Kawartha Pine Ridge District School Board, noting that for decades, the local community has enjoyed the former Ridpath School's open space when the school was not in session for individual, family, and organized group outdoor recreation activities, and that the board is requested to advise any individuals or agencies that may express interest in the property that the township would welcome an opportunity to discuss potential partnerships related to the outdoor open space with those interested parties in an effort to retain some publicly accessible community space. So I would like to move that motion. Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Actually, Councillor Henry is seconding it.
Thank you, Councillor Boyko. I am prepared to second this. We do have to note that the province has mandated that the school boards are to liquidate their stagnant assets.
Mm-hmm.
So technically, it's completely out of our hands. And at the same time, now with Bill 23 and the other mandates coming from the province, they get to do whatever they want with the property when they buy it. However, that said, I can appreciate the sentiment of this motion, and I agree that we should add our 2 cents worth if that's what it's actually going to be worth. So, but I do have a friendly amendment to your motion, and I would like to change the line that says that we discuss potential partnerships, because I think that could, we're not getting into business with anyone. I think that's a dangerous phrase possibly. And if we could change the discuss potential partnerships to discuss taking a collaborative approach.
I accept that friendly amendment.
All right, thank you. So it's been moved and seconded with a friendly amendment. And Deputy Mayor Black, did you want to speak to it?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Koulis, is there anything you'd like to say to the motion?
No, not at this point.
Okay, thank you. Then I will call the vote. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. All right, so we need a motion to receive all of the other consent items that are before us, including the rest of the correspondence report. Moved by Councillor Henry, seconded by Deputy Mayor Black. All in favor? Were you a yes, Mary?
Yep.
Okay. All right. We're going to move on to other new and unfinished business. And I'm going to go to I understand you want to pull the AMO request for delegations. But I'm going to go to Councillor Henry first because he wanted something to say on other business.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Senes. I have two things I would like to bring up. One is that I recently had the opportunity to attend the Ontario Association Police Services Board Spring Conference and annual general meeting in Niagara Falls last week. And just to give council and staff a little bit of a glimpse of the 3-day event, we introduced Ontario's first Inspectorate of Policing, which will bring another level of enforcement and monitoring to police services. Bail reform was a very hot topic, and it allowed me the opportunity to speak with Michael S. Kersner, the Solicitor General of Ontario, and we discussed the $112 million that is coming from the province to fix Ontario's broken bail system. Auto theft and organized crime was a very large discussion as well, because the funds of the organized crime and the auto theft epidemic is actually funding illegal drugs, guns, and human trafficking within our province. There are upgrades to the use of force reporting, so that the public can have greater security and comfort with policing that's going on. Also, we're launching a new app, which will also be a database, which will not only collect, but also be used to share information between the police services boards in a standardized format. So everyone's working together in the same format to make things very efficient and clear up some of the confusion that's been there in the past. So all of this, it was an example of how we're going to improve performance and enhance the effective delivery of public safety services, public awareness, and modernize our police governance in general. Ultimately, it's going to improve confidence in the public sector, safety sector. Key takeaway points from the events is that I feel very confident that the provincial government is taking action on a number of public safety and policing issues, in particular bail reform and organized crime. However, another key takeaway from this event, after meeting with numerous municipal employees, elected officials, and police boards from across the province, was that we're very fortunate here in the township of Selwyn, as our township staff are operating at a level that is not only respected, but actually admired and copied by other communities across the province. It gave me a sense of pride and reinforced my confidence in moving forward as a municipal councillor.
Thank you. Will you provide a copy of that to staff so that they can put that on the minutes?
Most certainly.
Thank you very much.
And second item under other business was that after Saturday's town hall meeting and fielding numerous emails and phone calls, I will be putting forward a motion for the June 27th council meeting for us to reach out to petition the provincial government to review and legislate regulations on short-term rentals. This is a hot topic. A lot of it's out of our hands. So I think we need to start addressing it with the province and see if we can get other municipalities on board with us. And as well, I think that we need to step it up and also take it to the federal government. As of recently, the retired Governor General Adrian Clarkson was speaking to the short-term rental situation across the province and the impact that it's having federally as well. So I think we need to reach out to them as also. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And Mary, you wanted to speak under other business for the request for delegations at AMO?
Yeah, I wanted to make a delegation request to meet with the Minister of Seniors to discuss changes to the Planning Act and the resulting impacts to the AODA, and specifically the exception for site plans and housing under 10 units, as well as to support AMO's recommendation found in Rick Donovan's interim report for the 4th review of the AODA. And also now hearing after Councillor Henry, maybe we need to have another delegation on short-term rentals to the province.
I'm not sure about doing a delegation at the AMO meeting, but first of all, your first one with accessibility. So Councillor Coolers would like to take a delegation to the Minister of Seniors and Accessibility at AMO to talk about AODA and the changes that are being made there. So we need someone to move that. Are you moving that, Councillor Coolers?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And seconded by Deputy Mayor Black. All those in favor? That's carried. And I'm not sure, again, whether we should be having a delegation at AMO with regards to short-term rentals. That maybe we should be seeing what Councillor Henry is bringing forward to us before we take that leap. What does the rest of my colleagues feel? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we have consensus here that we wait to see what the notice of motion is that's coming from Councillor Henry with regards to short-term rentals. We are going to be moving into closed session, but before we do, I'm looking for someone to move the bylaws 2023.
Sorry. I'm sorry, just one other item that we were going to add to new business.
Right.
Yeah, that's
yes,
okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, and I apologize. I do not like to do this, but I did get a call today from a solicitor acting on behalf of their client, who, by the way, has had 2 years to get this done. But anyway, is running up against a deadline. So I did send some information. So we're looking for council to approve authorizing a merger agreement. It's related to a severance over on Causeway View. So a portion of a larger piece of property is being severed and added to a waterfront property, and those properties would have to merge in title. So in order for the severance to go through by the deadline, we need to have the merger agreement executed, or at least authorized for execution today.
Is there any problem with public notice by doing this the way we are?
No.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Are there any questions? Deputy Mayor Black wants to move that, seconded by Councillor Boyko. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much.
So we would add one other authorizing bylaw to the list of bylaws. So we'd actually make that 44. So we'd have 40, 41, 42, and 44. Merger agreement would be 44.
Okay. All right. So we will deal with the bylaws 2023-040 sewer rates bylaw, 2023-041 water rates bylaw, 2023-042 authorizing bylaw for Rogers Telecommunications Tower, and 2023-044 for the merger that has just been approved. We'll come back to the confirming after we have our closed session. So can I have someone to move those bylaws? Mary, would you like to move those bylaws?
Sure.
All right, moved by Councillor Koulis, seconded by Councillor Boyko. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. I need a motion to go into closed session. Councillor Henry's moving. Deputy Mayor Black is seconding. All in favor? That's carried. We'll be going into closed in a couple of minutes. Thank you.